Let me start with the big one because you
Yeah.
you haven't been necessarily at the center of it, but you had the S2 cognitive test guy on your podcast. And now the S2 is all anyone is talking about because of CJ Stroud. Not even Bryce Young and his amazing score. It's always about the low score. And so Stroud scores an 18 on the S2. For my listeners, will you explain the S2 and why these guys hold it in such high esteem?
Sure thing, Joel. For years, the Wonderlic test was the gold standard as far as testing a person's intelligence and their ability to use things above the neck. That's the term that they use in the NFL at the next level. And the Wonderlic test historically is train A leaves a station at 3 o'clock. Train B leaves a station at 3:20. If train A goes 90 minutes and takes 2 laps, it's an IQ test, and it's a 4-minute test. It's in and out, and it's scored from 1 to 40. And historically, guys like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who went to Harvard, gets a 40. And there are other quarterbacks who have, great cerebral qualities who get a 40 in the high scores. And then you grade it from 1 to 40, you go from there. Somewhere along the way, these folks, Brendan Ally is his name. I mean, they're based out of Nashville. They're a company called S2 Cognition. They decided that that's not the best test for what's applicable to the next level when it comes to sports. So it really was baseball to start, but then it moved to football. And it's something called a processing test as opposed to an intelligence test or an IQ test. And what it is 45 minutes in a virtual reality setting. And it's almost how quick can you process images that are being flashed in your head and be able to process and anticipate what's coming next and what order those images are, what image is next. So say you've got 9 images coming at you and they say, what was image 3, 5, 7? You could be able to spot that out in instantaneous second, like boom, 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 boom. 45-minute test, and it's from 1 to 100. And they really started picking up prominence in 2020 during the COVID year, and then 2021 and 2022. And this is when it's kind of really made its big break because of the CJ Stroud story, which was leaked, and Bob McKinn got the scores. I don't know the scores. I don't have that information, but if that got from a team to Bob and that, he got a low score, that's fine. Also, though, that Bryce Young had a high score. I will tell you this. I spoke to a team yesterday about it. I said, gosh, Bryce Young has the highest score ever. No, slow down here. The kid from Stanford scored just as high, if not higher, on the S2 cognition test. We just don't talk about it. And that's Tanner McKee, who's the quarterback out of Stanford. So it's not like Bryce Young's the only guy that had such a high score. And it's not like CJ Stroud definitely had as low a score as they said. But it's got a different type of qualities that they're grading. It's how fast can you process information. It's not just an IQ test.
So here's an interesting, and this is not a pushback on you. Let me just push back against all of it, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Please.
So it's being hailed as this test that might not predict top-end success, right? You're hearing that a great score doesn't mean you're going to be a great player. But, and then there's this caveat, but we've never had a player score really low and go on and be a quality player. And so there's this narrative, at least, that there's no way you can overcome it. Now, here's the problem that I have with it, is that the test is asking me to essentially not believe my own eyes. And it's asking me to turn on tape of a guy like Will Levis and CJ Stroud back to back and see Levis really struggle processing information in real time on the film. Struggle understanding what type of trajectory to use. Throwing the ball to the wrong spots based on coverage, turning the ball over because of those decisions. And then turn on the CJ Stroud film and watch him time and time again put the ball in the exact correct spot based on the coverage. Use the correct trajectory. Change arm angles. Against Georgia, manipulate the pocket. Process information quicker. And yet the test is asking me to say, like, well, Levis processes information better than Stroud. And it's like, well, I'm sorry. My eyes are not lying to me. So the question then becomes, how important is the test to the decision makers in the NFL? And is this going to cause Stroud to fall?
It's a total package, as you know. It's the same thing as, well, he had, this injury his sophomore season and it checks out now, but that's something we put on the con list, that we have the pro and con list. It's a thing. It's a factor. The NFL teams want as much information as they can get. this is another aspect that they can use. It's a way to justify their pick. It's a way to furthermore question internally whether we're sure we want to make this trick. But no one's drafting a quarterback based on his S2 cognition score. You base it on the film, you base it on the interviews, you base it on the workouts, and then this is another piece to the puzzle. That said, it's a private company. These guys are not running a nonprofit. They're not looking to like this is a business.
Yeah,
and
of course.
You know, these numbers are out there, and whether or not you believe it or not is or you take a lot of validity, it's not is fine. But I'll tell you, half the NFL teams do pay for the S2 cognition test to be done, and they use those results, and it's part of their draft process. But Joel, absolutely. You've seen CJ Stroud play in how many college games? I trust your thoughts on CJ Stroud's intelligence and ability to make a good decision more than some test that he took on a random day that was 45 minutes of his life.
It's so fascinating, just the whole process, right? Because certain things can get blown out of proportion, and we talk about it maybe more than the decision makers talk about it. I don't know. Let's play a little bit of a game, and I'm going to throw out some names, and I'm going to let's call it floor, ceiling, or high low. Okay.
All right.
And based on what you're hearing, because again, listen, Peter Schrager's my guest. No one's more plugged in than Peter. You have absolutely killed it over the last few years, ever since we met, and as respected as any man in the NFL. And so I trust you when I start asking things like, okay, where's this guy's ceiling? Where's his floor in the draft? Okay, you know, how high could he potentially go? How low could he potentially slide? I think we all kind of know what's going on with Bryce Young. So I'm going to start with the guy we were just talking about, CJ Stroud. Where do you think his high is on Thursday night? And where's the floor? Where could we see him slide?
The interesting thing with this draft is that 2, 3, and 4 are really unique, and that 2 is a complete mystery, and that on paper, you'd say Houston should just go quarterback. It makes no sense that they wouldn't. They're going through year 3 of Davis Mills when you've got every quarterback other than Young on the board, and yet they might not go quarterback. So that's a little bit of a wild card. 3 is a team that wants to trade back. So now you're putting that into the mix where a team can trade up and throw this whole thing into flux. It's also a first-year GM and a first-year head coach. And 4 is a team that we know needs a quarterback, but doesn't necessarily have to go chalk because they've had their opportunity to get their hands and mitts on all these guys and have been thinking about it for 12 months. So I find it to be a really interesting draft. So CJ Stroud, he can go to Houston, and then I'll come on Friday morning and say, you know what? There's a lot of smoke about them not going CJ Stroud. Kudos to Nick Caserio and those guys for keeping it close to the vest. They probably wanted to see what kind of offers they would get to move up to 2, but at the end of the day, CJ Stroud's their quarterback. He could also slip a little bit because a team might move up to 3 because they love Richardson and they want the upside on Richardson. 4, the Colts might have fell in love with Will Levis, which I have heard. I have heard that the Colts – I've also heard that there are people in the building who really like Anthony Richardson in Indianapolis. But I think both of those players, you have to keep in the back of the head, they probably didn't expect CJ Stroud to be there at 4. So you start convincing yourselves on these other guys and say, well, look, if we're sitting there pretty and we get Levis or Richardson, we're good. I would say I'd be shocked if CJ Stroud was still on the board after 8 picks. Let's say Atlanta is their basement. So 2 to 8 for CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I was going to say 7. You know, I don't know if Vegas would let him get out of there. But that's what's so fascinating.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.